Alright, I'm going to make this as quick as possible, but you need to understand the basics behind keeping a lab notebook. The basic principle and reason that you keep a lab notebook is so that you understand what you're doing and so that somebody else can pick up that lab notebook and understand what you did. This allows others to spot your mistakes, i.e. if you need help in lab, a neat, organized lab book helps me quickly spot those mistakes. And the second big reason is you're creating a legal document. Chemistry's big money. New discoveries, new processes, new materials are all worth millions, if not billions of dollars. After all, you've all heard of Dr. Gary Buss, owner of the Los Angeles Lakers. Where did he get the money to buy the Lakers? He was a chemist. So there's big money in chemistry. What your lab notebook is doing is it's actually creating a legal record of your discoveries and of your work. Should somebody else claim to have developed the same thing as you did, your lab notebook serves as legal proof that you developed it independently and the time frame when you developed it, as in if it comes down to a fight who got it first, your lab notebook's a crucial piece of evidence. Therefore, not only should you always record things in your lab notebook, like you're going to have a stranger read them, but you want to record stuff in your lab notebook like Mark Zuckerberg is working across the bench from you. Beep, move on to the next slide. When constructing a lab notebook, there are some general guidelines you should make sure to follow. Matter of fact, if you don't follow them, I'll be taking off points. First and foremost, you can only write in pen. Remember, you're generating a legal document. If you use pencil, it can be erased, right? And therefore it's not considered legally valid, because how do we know that you didn't have something else there and then erase it and replace it? So you can only write in pen. Second, you can only keep actual lab stuff on one side of a page. You can use the other side of the page as scratch paper, but you can only write on the front of the page in terms of things that I will grade. Back of pages is reserved as scratch paper, taking notes when I'm lecturing, adding two numbers that you don't want to grab a calculator for. Back of pages are for scrap paper only. Front of pages are where you actually write the legal information. It's where you actually keep your lab records. Next, you need to number every single page of your lab in the top right corner. Every single page has to be numbered if it's written on. I will go through your lab at the end of the semester and ding you if you don't have page numbers. When I grade your lab reports every day, if you don't have a page number on the page I'm looking at, I'm going to ding you for it. So make sure you've got those page numbers there. When you make a mistake, it's human nature to want to scribble it out and destroy all record and all thought of it. You can't do that. When you make a mistake in your lab notebook, you have to draw a single line through it so that we're still able to read what the mistake is. We're not going to laugh at you or count points off because you make a mistake, right? The purpose of drawing a single line through it so that everybody knows it's a mistake but yet can still read it is once again goes back to that legal documentation thing. We want to make sure that you didn't have the word not in there, right? And you're changing the complete meaning of the sentence by scribbling it out in hopes of fooling somebody, right? That's why you have to draw that line through it so people can still read it. So when you make a mistake, don't scribble it out. Draw a single line through it. Next, any calculations you do need to be thoroughly explained in a lab report. You don't have to show me 2 plus 2 as part of the lab report. But you'd have to, for example, write down that density equals mass divided by volume in the calculations section of your lab report. You have to show me any calculations that you have to do that are required to do the lab. Why is this? A, legal documentation, and then B, let's say you get something wrong. The first thing I'm going to do before I begin picking apart your lab techniques is I'm going to double check your math. I can only double check your math if it's in your lab report written neatly so that I can review it very quickly. So you need to write out all the calculations you're doing as part of your lab report in your lab notebook. Finally, you have to write in complete sentences for most lab work. I don't want phrases, I want complete sentences. You need to complete that thought. Remember, mathematical equations are a complete sentence. Finally, after every single lab, you have to bring your lab book up to me and I have to initial it. At that point, I will be going through it and I will be taking off points for anything that's missing, any pencils, any missing page numbers, missing titles, and missing other things that we'll be going through here in the next couple slides. Some general point penalties I'll make you aware of right off the bat is any day you forget your lab notebook, it costs you 5 points. Any wet lab I don't initial costs you 5 points. The lab work done in pencil will cost you 5 points. Remember, every day of lab's worth 50 points, right? So I'm talking those 3 lowering you right away out of 8 contention. One last thing before we leave this page, I want you to write down the word blue balloons. Wouldn't you like to fly in my blue balloon? Right? That's not how the song goes. It's Beautiful Balloon, but it sounds like blue to me. So write down the word blue balloon. I hope you've written down the word blue balloon and are ready to move on to the next slide. Beep. The first page in your lab notebook should be a table of contents. It should say table of contents across the top and be numbered as the first page. I would recommend that you reserve the first 2 to 3 pages of your lab notebook as table of contents pages. That means you need to write table of contents across those first 3 pages as you number them. Your table of contents should include 3 pieces of information. It should include the lab title, it should include a date, and a page number. For example, the lab on safety notes was done the 4th of July, 1963, and it's on page 3. Glassware lab, done same day. Significant figures, done Labor Day, 1776, on page 5. Right? So you get the idea. Your table of contents should have the lab title, date, and page number. Any mistakes you made anywhere in the lab notebook should always be crossed out. Notice how I made a mistake and I crossed it out with a single line. Failing to have a table of contents correctly done will cost you 20 points on your lab notebook grade at the end of the semester. Beep, move on to the next slide. Every single page in your lab notebook should have a title at the top of the page, a date, and a number at the top of each page, page number at the top of each page. If any of those are missing, title, date, or page number, I take off 2 points for that page. Remember, you only have 100 points total for this lab notebook. So you miss 2 or 3 pages and you're down 6 points. So keep that in mind. Every single page that you've written on should have a title, a date, and a page number. Also, why don't you write down the word lexicon? I hope in this class to add several new words to your lexicon. Did you write down the word lexicon? I hope you wrote down the word lexicon. Thank you. Beep, move on to the next slide. This lab notebook is your record for the entire course. That means even days when we don't have wet labs, you should use your lab notebook to take notes. For example, you should be using your lab notebook to take notes over how I want you to do your lab notebook. All your notes for this class, unless they're on a handout, should be in your lab notebook. On days when you're simply taking notes, you still need to label the top of the page, date it, and record it in the table of contents. For example, if you had your lab notebook last week when we talked about safety, you would have made safety notes or lab safety as your title, dated it, and then you could have made all the notes you needed to over safety there, so that you have your lab notebook available to study for the exam. So make this your comprehensive record. You don't have to put just labs in this lab notebook. You can put other things too. Matter of fact, I want you to keep all your notes in your lab notebook for lab class. Alright, you can also use the back of pages for scratches or for scratch paper or notes. Let's move on to the next slide. Beep. If you wish to make notes about a given lab once that lab is already underway, or you want to take notes about a pre-lab lecture after you've already started the lab on another page, you may use the back of pages to take notes. However, nothing on the back of a page will be graded, and it can't be used legally to support anything you do. So keep in mind that back of pages are worthless. They're only used for rough note-taking involving the lab that you're talking about. For example, your density lab. Dr. Kelly wrote down this wonderful illustration on the board. I wanted to write it down so that I didn't forget it, but I'd already started the lab, so I'm going to write it on the back of the page so I have it. Notice that back of pages, because they're not part of the legal record, aren't titled, dated, or numbered. Move on to the next slide. Beep. When we do a wet lab, there's a certain prescribed format you have to follow for keeping your records. What you'll discover is nearly every single university that offers freshman labs will require you to keep your laboratory record basically the exact same way. First, when you start a lab, the first page of that lab should have the full title of the lab. You can use an abbreviated title at the top of the page. For example, for the lab you'll be doing today, you have Submarine Adventures Density at the top of the page, but the full name of the lab is Submarine Adventure Density Saves the Day. So write the full lab title on the first page of the lab and label it title. Then, the second thing on that first page should be the purpose. The purpose should be a 1 to 2 sentence description of the lab's goals or purpose. Again, for the Submarine Adventure lab you'll be doing as the first wet lab in class, the purpose of this lab is to determine the identity of two unknowns using their densities. And see, I made a mistake writing the single for density, so I crossed it out with a single line. Right, so you're getting an idea of the format. Procedure. Let's move on to the next slide here. Beep. Alright, perhaps the most important part of any lab write-up is the procedure, because this is the part that makes you unique. This is the part that lets others replicate your work. So it's important when you're writing your own procedure that you be very detailed. For most labs in here, however, all you'll have to do is write the word procedure and then reference the lab's title and page number from your lab notebook, from your lab text. Right? Most of the labs we're doing out of your textbook that you've purchased. So rather than recopy that procedure by hand, all you need to do is write the title of the lab and the page number. Then you also need to make a note in your lab notebook of any changes that Dr. Kelly made to the lab procedure. Sometimes, however, I'll ignore the book completely and write a procedure up on the board. In those cases, you're going to need to copy down the complete procedure in your lab notebook. Submarine Adventures Density is one such day, where I don't want to say freestyling, but I like my procedure better than the book's. Therefore, rather than following the book procedure, you need to write down the procedure given to you in the sample lab book handout. So this handout's serving a double purpose. So that would be your procedure. When you're not using the book's procedure, you need to write down the complete procedure. The procedure doesn't have to be a work of great English. Just like your book most of the time uses a numbered list, you can too. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3, Step 4. Numbered lists are great. They're a best friend. Why don't you write down the word flask? I hope you're writing down the word flask. Are you writing down the word flask? I hope you wrote down the word flask. Thanks. That's all. Beep. One of the most important and crucial parts in terms of your lab grade is recording your data. You have to record data nicely, neatly, accurately, and clearly. Nearly all the labs that you'll do have tables already set up to record the data. If you want, you can photocopy the page from your lab book, cut it out, and paste those pre-made tables into your lab notebook. Otherwise, I recommend that you copy to the best of your ability those data tables in your lab notebook in terms of hand drawing them. Here's a nice, neat example of a data table to record your data in for the lab over density. See how your unknowns are labeled clearly. There's a space for your unknown numbers. Similar sets of data are lined up. I should be able to look at that data page and quickly discern what your measurements are and what units are used. Alrighty, that's it. Next slide. Beep. The next part of your lab that we want to talk about are the calculation sections. Any math that you have to do in order to work the lab should be written neatly in such a way that I can look at your calculations, tell what you're doing, and why. This doesn't have to be War and Peace. It doesn't have to be anything in depth. For example, if you're solving for density, show me your mass divided by your volume with the units clearly labeled, written large, nicely, and neatly. So make sure that you show all your calculations written nicely. If you're somebody who just makes a mess when you do math, you like to write numbers sideways and all that, work the calculations on your scrap paper, then copy them nice and neatly into the calculation sections of your lab notebook. And remember, by scrap paper, I mean the backs of your pages, right? Then write them nicely, neatly in the calculation section. But you have to write your calculations out nicely and neatly so that I can follow what you're doing and so that another person could follow what you're doing. Another reason I like showing this page is this page has a capital sin on it. You can clearly see in the photograph that there is whiteout on that page. In a lab notebook, you should never, ever, ever, ever have whiteout because any mistakes you made are supposed to be crossed out. Anything that you white out will be assumed to be derogatory to the case you were wishing to make, and that's why you were covering it up, right? So in a lab book that you're creating for a legal document or a grade, you would never, ever, 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 ever use whiteout. Always cross things out. Matter of fact, why don't we make the word that you're going to write down whiteout? Write down the word whiteout. Once you've written down the word whiteout, move on. Beep. All your wet labs should end with a conclusion. Again, doesn't need to be War and Peace. I will be upset if it is War and Peace. For most labs, a conclusion should be 1 to 2 sentences stating the identity of your unknown and or your accuracy and precision, when that's applicable. Some labs you're not going to be able to calculate either one. Example I like to give is for your density lab that you're doing today. An unknown number, 42, has a density of 2.32 grams per cubic centimeter, which is close to aluminum's density of 2.40. Therefore, my unknown is aluminum. My percent error is 3.33%. You don't know what percent error is yet. That's the subject for another discussion. But this concludes our discussion of how you should format your lab notebook.